So a certain someone says I have a dry voice and need to drink more water. So here we go. This is me drinking water. And still the same voice. That's just how I sound. It's weird too, because I got a really bad sinus problem, which is why I can do the golden voice on the fly, precious, but my regular voice sounds dry. Weird, ain't it? Okay, let's get to the real reason for the video. I semi-promise this is my last video about Captain Mary Sue. This isn't about the silly crap about Captain Marvel being a better film because it beat The Dark Knight's box office. We already know it's not the better film, and we know it didn't actually beat The Dark Knight's numbers. Why? Because unlike Captain Marvel, Batman didn't need 3D ticket prices and a cat to reach $1 billion. He just needed good acting and a solid script. No, this video is about character arcs, or the lack of them in Captain Marvel's case. Several people have pointed out how Carol Danvers doesn't have any real character arc in the film. She's the same at the end of the film as she is at the beginning. There's no hero's journey to be found, no change or growth on her part, or any change or growth in the characters around her. Everything ends the same way it begins, with one real exception. Carol now knows that the Kree lied to her about her powers and history. That's not a character arc, that's just conflict. There are a number of character arcs, but let's stick to the positive ones. If we do that, there are 3 basic arcs: change, growth, and flat. The change arc is pretty obvious. It's basically the hero's journey. The protagonist has to overcome internal and external adversity, with the external adversity representing an element of the internal conflict. At the end, the protagonist is a different, often more aware and enlightened person. The growth arc is similar except that the focus is on the internal struggle. The character may not change all that much, but may reach a better understanding of himself and the world around him. A good example of this is John Preston from Equilibrium. He's a badass from the beginning of the film to the end, but he learns to accept his emotions over the course of the story. The flat arc is a little tricky because it technically involves change, but not change of the protagonist. Instead, it's the change the protagonist brings to the world around him. In this arc, the character remains the same from beginning to end, but throughout the story, his actions and opinions affect those around him, presumably for the better. A great example of this would be Maximus from The Gladiator. He's basically the same guy, but his actions change some people's mind about him, the Emperor, the Roman Empire, and the gladiators in general. So which of those 3, change, growth, or flat, did Carol go through in Captain Marvel? I know you think it's flat, but that's just her ass. The correct answer is none of the above. She never changes, she never grows, and none of the other characters change or grow either. Everything ends as it begins, again with the sole exception being Carol's knowledge about what the Kree did. That's not a character arc, but damn if there ain't people trying to argue that it is. Someone tweeted this thread to me, and I blotted out the woman's name so nobody can bother her. Don't try to find her or anything. I got this. This woman, let's call her Amber, doesn't like the criticism about Carol's lacking character arc. She says in her opening tweet, quote, "It's bugging me that the most constant criticism, but one I've literally only heard from men, is that Carol Danvers has no arc. She's super powerful at the start and the end. No personal journey. They seem to think that you need to come from nothing and become ultra powerful to grow as a person. No, that's just a weak straw man you constructed. The criticism is that Carol Danvers doesn't change, grow, or earn her power. She is precisely the same person at the end of the film as she was at the beginning, and so is the world around her. Nothing has changed other than her learning about the Kree restraining her power. She doesn't change her views, and neither does the rest of the world. That's the issue. Male heroes often don't have powers, then get powers, then change as people. With great power comes great responsibility, etc. Power fantasy and the emotional challenges that come with having these powers. Danvers' arc is coming to realize and then address that institutions and shit men around her won't let her grow. That's the fucking point. That may be the point, but it ain't a character arc. It's just conflict. It's also poorly constructed conflict because it's never established why the Kree won't let Carol grow. I realize the answer is that because they're men and they're afraid of strong women, or some other retarded feminist argument. I know that's redundant, but that really isn't a good answer. What is the danger to the Kree if Carol is allowed full access to her power? Will it undo their brainwashing? Will she turn on them? Will she simply be too powerful for them to control? If it's the latter, which I'm sure it is, you now have to explain why that is a problem. Why do they want to control her? Again, I'm sure the answer is something about evil men, but you need a better answer than that. Overcoming this restraint isn't much of a character arc because we don't know why Carol would want or need to do it. Maybe the Kree's concerns are valid. Maybe she would lose control if she had full access to her powers. Maybe she wouldn't use her powers responsibly and it's too dangerous to take a chance. This Anakin Skywalker routine ironically reveals the flaw in the theory of men holding women back. It lacks a reason. Why would men want or need to hold women back? What benefit does it give men to do this? None of that is answered because the answer really isn't important. It's about the narrative that women don't succeed because men won't let them. But if you want to address the problem, you have to ask why shit happens. And in doing so, you often find that the reasons aren't as black and white as you would like. That's where we get stories like Captain Mary Sue. They explore the so-called female experience by showing how women are already strong and powerful and don't need to earn their heroine status, but instead need to fight against a system that won't let them be their true selves, all while behaving in a way that isn't the slightest bit heroic. As Amber says, quote, "At the start of the film, she has powers. She's told by a powerful man in her life that she only has the powers because they gave them to her, with his own blood no less. And he tries to stop her realizing how powerful she is. Also always telling her to calm down, not be emotional." Why? In reality, it's the literal opposite. They're actually limiting her power. The device on her neck that they tell her is needed to control her power is literally just there to stop her from reaching her true potential. The institution won't let her grow. Again, why? What some people have missed is that legions of women and other minorities are sitting in the cinema nodding their heads. Well, I'm a minority, an actual minority, unlike women who are not a minority but the majority of the population. And I find myself shaking my head in disbelief that anyone could be so arrogant to think that she can speak on billions of people's behalf. All you've shown is conflict. You haven't even given any context to why any of these things happened. The Kree have to have a reason for doing this to Carol. What is it? Is their reason valid, misguided, mistaken? None of these questions are answered. It's simply done to make the Kree look bad. That's fine if you're just looking for a villain. But if what you want to do is critique a real-world situation via metaphor, you have to give reasons for why people do things. They don't have to be good reasons. People do lots of fucked up things for stupid reasons, but they still have reasons. So when you say, quote, "Nambers doesn't become a powerful woman, she is a powerful woman. But some dick is telling her she's not. Some institution has policies in place to hold her back. Her emotional arc doesn't come from gaining power but realizing they're working to limit her potential." There is no emotional arc in realizing that they've limited her power because we don't have any context for why they're doing it. We also don't have any context for how this affects Carol. Remember, in the film, Carol has no memory of her past life. She learns about it over the course of the film, so there's no real emotional impact to being held back because she has no idea what's happening. Amber likes to talk about women and minorities, but in both examples, those people are not only aware that they're being held back, but typically know why. That's not the case with Carol. She's being told that her emotions negatively affect her powers and has no reason to think this is untrue. It also happens to be true. Her emotional state does affect the intensity of her powers, so this isn't a lie. Neither is the thing with the inhibitor. It does control her power, which they let her know. So what exactly is the arc here? Carol finds out that the Kree are doing exactly what they said they were doing? Amber goes on, quote, "A lot of people who claim she has no arc also complain that the final showdown is anticlimactic because she cheats, and OMG are they so not getting any of this at all." Maybe they're not getting it because there's nothing to get. Carol gets access to this power she's never really used, devastates the Kree with zero effort, and then the end. She never has to learn to control it, she never has to discover that she has this hidden power, and she never struggles in the final fight. All that would be fine if Carol experienced some inner growth, but she doesn't. She hasn't gone through any self-discovery, any earning of the power, anything to show she's worthy of it, to suddenly having unlimited power and destroying everything in sight with no effort. Imagine if this was a male character. It would look cheap. Don't take my word for it. Just look up Ichigo Kurosaki from Bleach. He just has power. Like every power you could possibly need, he's got it and it makes him boring. He doesn't actually get interesting until he loses those powers and then has to get them back. It's even better when he has to master the Hollow Mask because he gets his ass handed to him several times. Now, contrast that with someone like Naruto, who for half of his series is nowhere near the most powerful character. Even once he fully bonds with the Nine Tails, he's still not really a threat to Madara or Hashirama. Naruto earns his wins, sometimes in very silly ways, but he learns and works to win. And in his final battle with Sasuke, he loses, not just the fight, but his best friend. Carol doesn't go through any of this. Instead, quote, as soon as she says, fuck that, and realizes they've held her back, he wants to make it about a fist fight, bring her down to his level, make it about physical strength, to prove that she's taken on board his patronizing lessons from earlier when lying to her. Previous lessons, you'll never be special unless you can prove it by beating me in a fist fight with no powers. You're only this good because we made you to be. Without us, you're nothing. Well, this is key with many heroes. The idea that their powers don't define them, that the powers are just a means to an end, and it's the person, their character, that matters is fundamental to the hero's journey. This is why when Luke almost turns to the dark side, when he comes back, he doesn't just spare Vader. He throws away his lightsaber. He refuses to use the Force. He's not defined by those things. It's his character, not his weapons, that make him good. This is also why you see so many stories about heroes losing their powers or being unable to fight properly. When they doubt themselves, their tools are useless. It's only when they realize that the true power lies within and is defined by who they are and what they represent that they get their powers back. Carol, on the other hand, represents the opposite. Instead of showing that she doesn't need her powers to defeat her enemies, she, quote, uses her amazing power on him and says she has nothing to prove. That's the fucking arc. No, that's called a heel turn. That's literally what the villain would do. It's also not a character arc. The character arc requires the character to change or grow. If the character doesn't change, then the supporting cast needs to. A good example of this is, again, Maximus from Gladiator. He's the same from beginning to end, but the world and the people around him change. If he merely defeats his enemies, nothing changes. Amber doesn't get this in a way that is truly amazing. Like, what stories did your parents read to you as a child for you to be this bad at understanding character arcs? 5-year-olds have a better understanding than you. She keeps arguing, quote, her arc has personal growth because she stops trying to please the spunk trumpet and the shitty and lying people who basically kidnapped her and told her she was lesser. She goes from trying to prove her value to this dude and team to knowing they have nothing to do with her worth. She finds self-worth. How is that not a fucking arc of personal growth? Because Carol never thought that she was unworthy. She just thought that she had uncontrollable power, which is true. So there is no growth. She has no memory of her previous life and then finds out about it, but it doesn't change how she thinks or feels. She reacts the same as before, so there's no growth. In fact, her reaction upon discovering what the Kree did is precisely what they thought she would do, because such is her character, so there's no growth there either. Ergo, there is no arc. Ember tries another angle, quote, she knows that her work doesn't come from proving herself to Jude the dude. She's better than him. Why is she better than him? I know the answer is because vagina, but from a story perspective, why is she better than him? What qualities does she have to prove that she's a more moral and ethical person? And is so powerful she can even work to fix the wrongs that they've done to others. A proper hero. No, that's not a proper hero. A proper hero would have never done wrong to begin with. In fact, the hero you describe sounds arrogant, egotistical, and narcissistic. We've seen this type of hero before, and raise your hand if you think Anakin Skywalker is a proper hero. I mean, what reason does Carol have to right these wrongs? Is she just doing it to do it, or is it because the writers thought this is what a heroine should do? So now that her argument is clearly not working and she knows it, Amber resorts to a nice logical fallacy. Quote, I felt so much for every time P. Nimarov had to listen to people who didn't get that the film is addressing very real experiences and how she does have an arc. If you can't see the arc in this film, you don't listen to women about their experiences. Oh, the emotional appeal. Look, that's not how this works. Saying that it's about so-called real experiences doesn't change that Carol Danvers' character arc is so flat you could use it to smooth cement. She doesn't change, she doesn't grow, and her so-called real experience is literally her having powers that she doesn't know how to control, so the Kree put a power limiter on her. If, however, it turned out that she could control them if taught how to do it, and they feared this and so kept her from accessing her full power, then you'd have something. If they fed her lies about how she destroyed her world and killed her family with her powers, then you'd have something. If they instilled in her a fear or self-doubt based on something tangible, then you would have something. Amber goes on a tangent about how Nick Fury isn't emasculated in the film because he respects Captain Mary Sue, and I don't care. The film ruined an aspect of his origin, so it really doesn't matter. She sums up her points by saying, quote, "When it's out to watch at home, here are some things I recommend paying more attention to if you want to get more from the film. How the Supreme Intelligence appears as a friend while holding you back. Yes, pay attention to how the Supreme Intelligence, quote, befriends Carol after she's been brainwashed and, quote, holds her back for no apparent reason. How they'll learn to be a hero now that I have powers or can't apply because she's already a hero. That makes no sense. At the start of the film, she's basically part of Space Ice hunting down innocent space Mexicans, and she's lost her memory, so she doesn't remember her so-called heroic act of self-sacrifice. She's not a heroine. Note how Danvers reacts to finding out the horror she's been a part of. She doesn't get defensive and deny. She's a hero. She's going to make amends and do what's right. That's one message I wish could sink into more people. So there's no emotional conflict or change. She was told what to do and thought it was right because that's what the Kree said, and when someone said it was wrong, she just goes along with that without any consideration for the mindfuck it would create. I mean, we know that this happens. We know that there are soldiers who were just following orders, who were horrified by what they were doing and tried to rationalize or compartmentalize it to deal with it. Carol just goes from one to the other, no problem. I thought she was with a Kree, not Ingsoc. Note that the character arc went over people's heads here, supposedly because it's not about going from powerless to powerful. That's just a straw man you created to get around the fact that Carol has no character arc, and neither does anyone else in the film. But it's interesting that you would choose Black Panther as an example to prove your point, because it actually disproves your point. Quote, T'Challa changes how things have been done, proves we can be better than those that came before us, and that we're stronger together. That's what made him interesting, not the bulletproof catsuit and a flower. T'Challa also loses his power, and has to discover everything that you mentioned by losing that power. Not just the suit, but his status as king. He changes. He finds out that the way he views the world may be wrong, and in turn, that change extends to those around him. Ironically, it's the villain who initiates the change. T'Challa doesn't start off thinking these things, fights Killmonger just to prove that both he and Killmonger are right, and then stays in power. That would be a flat character arc where the Wakandans change, but T'Challa doesn't. It must be an ignorance of experiences women share that throw people off, but there's no excuse. It must be so painful to discover that women's so-called real experiences aren't nearly as dramatic or interesting or heroic as you thought. All you've told us is that women don't have to do anything to earn power or status. They should just have it because they're women. They shouldn't have to work for it. It should just be given to them, and any attempt to block that taking of power is, quote, holding them back. You know, if you try really hard, you too can lose a limb fighting a Sith Lord, and then lose the other 3 trying to high jump over a dude with a fucking laser sword. Stop the Anakin Skywalker routine. All Captain Marvel shows is what female entitlement looks like. This is what it looks like when the woman thinks she deserves something she hasn't earned and gets mad when people won't let her have it. It's amazing that so often female characters don't have to sacrifice anything to become heroines. What is it about feminists that makes them think merely being female is heroic and means that anything the character wants she should either get or already has? Why is this the story that they think will inspire girls? There are no flaws in any feminist characters. I mean, there are, but feminists don't see them as flaws. Their leads are perfect, and it's really the society, specifically men, who are bad and need to change. Even if the character has basically participated in genocide, which is what Carol does, that's fine because she owns up to it. Hands washed. With heroes like these, who needs villains?